This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for March 8th, 2019. We had a gap down in the Qs and SPY right to support. All right, we've been looking at the hourly here, right to support, right to the left there into the previous retest. And then the market's pretty much been sideways, kind of rallied off the lows, gave us an hourly sell setup, right? And then back to sideways there on the SPY. And similar pattern on the Qs, a little bit stronger there. So coming into yesterday, right, we got that hourly sell set up, right? We got the gap down. Like I said, this was the timing to initiate the bearish bias. We went over it the day before, that if we break here, look for either an hourly sell setup or a breakdown. Okay, instead what we got was a sell setup. So a sell setup is in the context of a downtrend, right? We get a series of higher lows. We break under the higher lows and then we go lower. And then today that sell setup got to target, right? So now we got a little bit of a bounce here and just sideways. Okay, so where does that leave us? So this hourly still in a downtrend and then the daily now into support. Okay, what's going on that's different here that we haven't seen this year is this weekly sell setup. Okay, so for the first time this year, a weekly low was broken. So we actually got below last week's low. Okay, but I don't think it's going to be an easy drop because there was a lot of back and forth on the daily on the way up here into the grind. What I expect is that if we do try to go lower right away, that'll turn into a bottoming tail next week. And then I think if we don't try to go lower, you'll see a lot of inside bars. Okay, so I think it's going to be a neutral to bearish bias going into Monday because of the fact that the pullback is now into support. All right, we got this this sell off here into support. So neutral on the larger time frames and then still bearish. We'll wait for this hourly to break the newly formed downtrend. Okay, so neutral to bearish going into Monday. I just think that trying to get shorts here, unless you're kind of looking farther out, is going to be a tough place to initiate here. Okay, so I think next week I expect a lot of back and forth, especially if we try to go right away. I think you'll see this kind of week turn into a bottoming tail, okay, because of the way that we moved up on the daily here, right, creating support because it was more of a grind. We didn't get accelerated. We didn't have price voids created. So going into next week, going to be looking neutral to bearish. Again, we'll watch the hourly to see if we get some semblance of a transition out of this hourly downtrend. Okay. All right. So let's go over a couple things from today. So I showed you this, right? Hourly sell setup. So we came across this loco shortly after the open. I think wasn't really on our radar. And then once I saw this gap down, gave it to you, sell setup. See the similarities there? Same pattern. You get the sell off. Here's a high or a low, higher low, higher low, and then once the higher low breaks, that's your chance to get in. Very nice move on the loco. Okay, so something I wanted to go over today is, well, how do I know when I should get out, right? How do I know what the exit was? This potentially the exit? I mean, it kind of looked like one at the time, right? So that was like around 1380. And you can see now it's at, 1250, right? So that's a pretty big difference, right? And I think ultimately the answer is you never really know, right? You can use whatever reference points you can, right? The 200 could serve as some support. The bottom of this green bar could serve as some support, right? And this just continued. So what I wanted to go over today are what kind of trades potentially you want to hold as just an all-day trend. So, you could use pivots, you could use hourly bar by bar, right? And that could be the way that you manage the piece that you intend to hold until the end of the day. So how I determine which ones I want to hold as all-day trades comes down to 5 criteria, okay? All right, and we'll go over all of these and see which ones the loco has. You want to have as many as possible. It doesn't mean that it has to have all 5, but the more the better. Okay, so first, is there a daily gap? Okay, daily gap creates shock, creates urgency among larger time frame players. Okay, a lot of times you get news like earnings, right? I don't remember if that was the case on the loco. Probably was. Let's see. So that means maybe fundamental players are reacting as well. Yeah, they had their fourth quarter earnings. Okay, so we do have the daily gap. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, is it doing something to the weekly that is changing the trend? Okay, now prior, right, to this today's gap, what did this look like? Or prior to this week, had been moving up, right? Obviously breaking the trend, okay? And then number 3, are we getting increased volume? Now, it seems very obvious here on the daily after the fact, okay? And so you won't know that that's how the daily is going to turn out. So what I use is the 15, right? Once the 15 is finished forming, right, that's usually, you can see that, okay, this is the biggest bar on the chart in days and days and days, right? So that's enough. Well, you should know within the first 15 minutes if this is got a lot of players stepping in and a lot of people getting involved. Okay, and then the next thing we want to look for is retracements and consolidation. Okay, so as you're in it, it's working its way. Of course, when you get in something short, right, you're hoping that it just produces only wide range bars, right? And you don't want to see, oh no, it's basing here. At some point, this was a green bar, right? That is not exactly what you want to see, but it's actually what it has to do to maintain and not get ahead of itself, right? So again, you can see a base here to set up the next move, base here to set up the next move. So these moves, you actually, while they may not be the easiest to sit through, is actually what you want to see if something's going to maintain the trend and likely close at the lows. Okay, and then the last thing is you want to have a relative weakness or strength to the market. So if you look at what the loco was doing, let's say for the first, whatever, all morning, right, first few hours of the morning, right, and you're in it, look at the Q, what are the Qs doing? Okay, so that loco clearly was on its own page, relative weakness to the market. Okay, so something like this loco meets all the criteria for something that you could want to hold till the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying you have to hold the whole position, right, to the end of the day, but say you want to just hold a third, a quarter, right, to see if you can stay in this as long as you can and maximize what you get out of it. Because on something like this, turns out, you know, whatever line of support you want to draw here from here to here, you know, really still going through and still closing at the lows. Okay, that way you can capture potentially a greater percentage of the move without having to give the whole thing back, right? So you just trim it down to the runner there to a third or a quarter. Okay, so you want to only do that on plays that are working. If something's moving against you, taking out your stop, that's not the type of thing that you want to say, well, should I just hold this till the end of the day and see what happens, right? Only on plays that are working in your favor, right? And you're figuring out, how do I want to manage this? Okay, is this something I can hold till the end of the day? So I just want to go over this OEC. This OEC was called in the room, and I want to look at that same criteria, because for this OEC that I called for the room ended up being a break-even trade, but my intention was to try and hold this until the end of the day. Okay, so we got this base here, tried to break out, that got rejected, and then we played it underneath 2190. Wasn't the easiest to get filled. I even tried to do an ad here and couldn't get filled, so just had to stick with the original play. So we did get filled here, right? And then the stop was 2250. Okay. So my intention was to hold it till the end of the day. Now I wanted to get some out if we got to new lows. Unfortunately, we retested the lows, right? And instead got the bounce. So now let's look at, why was I thinking hold this as long as we could, potentially to the end of the day? Is it a gap, right? Absolutely, it is a gap. Okay, are we damaging the weekly? Are we changing where we're going on the weekly? I would say we are. We had probably gone into we'd gone into more sideways than up, but sideways, and now we're breaking any kind of weekly support that had been established there. Are we doing significantly more volume than we have been doing typically on the daily chart, or even if we just go to the 15-minute here, and we can see that before it triggered the play in, okay, that's a pretty biggest one that I can see in days and days. So something is significantly going on here. People are reacting to this gap. Okay, did we get consolidation? Did we get retracements? We did. That's how it gave us the opportunity to try to do an ad, even if we didn't get filled, right? And so, okay, we were getting bases, we were getting retracements. Okay, so that was good. And then was it showing relative weakness to the market, right? You look at the OEC, what it was doing, and then what was the Qs doing, right? Qs were trying to move higher, running into resistance and giving pullbacks, right? Whereas the OEC opened here, right, and never came close back up to those highs. So this was intended to be held as an all-day play. Now, how do I hold the all-day plays, right? If I had been able to get some out, that would have been better, but instead, like I said, I trailed them on the hourly, and that trailed over this bar, over 71. Our entry was under 90, but you did get filled a little bit late, most likely, so pretty much a break-even trade as it trailed out over here. Okay, so not every play, the point is, not every play is gonna necessarily, even if it meets all 5 criteria, is gonna work as astoundingly as the loco, right? But at least when it comes to, so you got something working, you want to stick with it, right? And the OEC for the most part, for most of the day, was staying profitable, right? And never took out our stop. So, you know, that is not the issue. Definitely if something's taking out your stop, that's not the type of thing you want to say, well, I'll just see what happens at the end of the day and just let it go against you, right? So, on something like these, if you want to be able to try and capture more of the move, because a lot of times on these big gaps, on these big event days, right? I mean, you could look at this loco days or weeks from now, and this day will definitely stand out, right? On these days, and these are the days that typically we want to try to play them, are the ones where you're going to get some really nice moves. So it just gives you a chance to kind of maximize the winner, right? And so you can hold on to it until the end of the day. And then if it turns out that maybe there's not going to be that much to it, right? Then that's how I manage. So I don't have to end up giving the whole thing back if it decides to rally and go the other way, or that it's found a bottom. Okay. So just those 5 criteria. If you wanted to kind of get them down, you can always just rewind the video, go back as we kind of walk through it. I did have things written down, like little paragraphs, but I explained them as verbally. It's the same thing. But if you wanted to read them, you could just pause the video and take a look at them as well. So let's just recap going into next week, right? Larger time frame neutral, shorter time frame bearish. We'll look to see if we get some other kind of bearish pattern here, maybe a sell setup, maybe a base that breaks down. Okay, but the daily Qs and SPY are going to be into support. Okay, so it might mean pretty choppy trading for next week. Like I said, I think if we try to go lower right away, you're going to see, I think, a reversal of that. And that will actually create that bottoming tail in the weekly. But we'll see. We'll see if we go higher. We'll look to see if we get a bearish pattern, and then the failure of that bearish pattern will line us back up for a bullish bias. But for now, short-term bearish, long-term neutral. Okay. So that's going to do it for me this week. I hope you all have a great weekend. We'll see what the market brings us on Monday, and I will talk to you then. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.